The 16th Legion was a brotherhood born in victory, forged on terror, tempered by the endless wars of the unification. The Lunar Wolves marched across the stars like a thunderhead. Wherever the Emperor pointed, they struck. Clean, swift, invincible. No enemy could withstand them. No world could deny them. They were led by Horus Lupercal, first found of all the Primarchs, brightest star among the Emperor's sons. In Horus burned a fire unmatched, a commander without equal, a statesman of dazzling charisma, a warrior whose blade never faltered. Horus was not simply beloved by his legion, he was adored. And the Emperor, in his infinite design, made it known that Horus was first, among equals. When the Emperor named him War Master, supreme commander of all Imperial forces, the galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath. It was a proclamation heard on every world, whispered in every hall of power. Horus was the future. The Lunar Wolves, his executioners. In honor of this ascension, the 16th Legion cast aside their old name. No longer would they be Lunar's Wolves. They became the Sons of Horus, and they painted the Eye of Horus across their banners, their armor, their very hearts. No one doubted the Emperor's choice. For years, the Great Crusade surged forward faster than ever under Horus's leadership. The Sons of Horus exemplified everything the Imperium believed itself to be: fearless, swift, and just. But pride is a blade sharper than any sword. On the crimson sands of Goro, the Sons crushed the alien empire of the Interrex. They shattered the green tides of the Orcs at the Battle of Ulanor, the greatest victory of the entire crusade. Horus himself led the charge, his mace Worldbreaker scattering Xenos flesh and armor with contemptuous ease. After Ulanor, the Emperor retired to Terra, leaving Horus the burden of conquest. The Imperium was in the War Master's hands. The Lunar Wolves, now the Sons of Horus, would be his mailed fist. For a time, they wore their new name with pride. In jade and sea green, they marched. In every speech, Horus spoke of loyalty, of brotherhood, of destiny. His captains, Abaddon, Aximand, Sedere, became legends in their own right. The galaxy seemed poised to fall entirely into the Imperium's grasp, and still, small shadows moved at the edge of sight. Some spoke of unease in the War Master's heart, of doubts unspoken, of dreams dark and heavy, of resentments growing like black mold. Whispers traveled with the fleet, rumors that the Emperor had abandoned his sons, had left them to bleed in the void while he pursued some secret work on Terra. To many, these were merely the grumblings of soldiers too long from home. But others, subtle men like Malagurst the Twisted, or the word-bearers who walked among them, saw in those doubts a wound that could be torn open. The Sons of Horus remained loyal. They bled, they fought, they conquered. They smashed the fortresses of the Lacrimata and burned the singing forests of Zenobia. Always at the head of the spear was Horus, a living god among warriors. But loyalty, once questioned, is a fragile thing. When the War Master was wounded at Davin, stricken by a Xenos blade, it was not Imperial medicine that saved him. It was dark ritual, sorcery, whispered prayers, unclean arts. And when Horus awoke, something within him had changed. His rage was no longer the rage of a man betrayed by foes. It was the fury of a god betrayed by lesser creatures. Horus looked at the Imperium not as a labor of love, but as a monument stolen from his rightful hands. And his sons, they followed. Not blindly, but willingly, eagerly. The Sons of Horus were not corrupted at the edge of a knife. They were seduced by the sweetest lie of all, that they had been wronged, that their loyalty had been betrayed first, that the Emperor had turned from them. They knelt before Horus at the Whisperheads. They swore new oaths in the name of old brotherhoods. When Horus spoke of rebellion, of a new Imperium born of blood and fire, the sons listened, and they believed. They believed with the same ferocity they had once given the Emperor. They would fight for Horus as they had once fought for Terra. Only now the targets of their fury would be their own brothers. The first blow fell at Isstvan III. Under false orders, the loyal elements of the Sons of Horus and of the World Eaters, Death God and Emperor's children, were sent planet-side and bombarded from orbit. Vox channels filled with screams, legionaries who had fought side by side for centuries were reduced to dust in seconds. Those who survived found themselves betrayed by their own kin. On the decks of the vengeful spirit, Horus stood impassive. The Sons of Horus followed his gaze, hands on bolters, faces impassive. They had chosen their war master. They had chosen their path. The galaxy would burn for it. Thus was the end of the Sons of Horus's innocence. No longer the Emperor's brightest blade, they became the tip of a dagger aimed at his heart. When they marched on Isstvan V, they did so without hesitation. When they butchered the Loyalists at the drop site massacre, their bolters sang the song of treason with cold precision. When they raised the Eye of Horus above the broken bodies of Ferrus Manus and his iron hands, they declared to the stars that the true era of humanity had begun, an era shaped by Horus. In that moment, the Sons of Horus became the architects of humanity's greatest fall. And yet, even then, even with their names blackened and their souls weighed in blood, some among them wondered. Could Horus truly overthrow the Emperor? Could the Imperium truly be remade? Or had they simply traded one master for another, a darker, crueler lord whose ambition would shatter everything they had once believed? The Sons of Horus did not know. They only knew that they would follow their war master wherever he led, even into damnation. The galaxy reeled from betrayal, but nowhere was the wound deeper than within the Sons of Horus themselves. When the War Master made his stand against the Emperor, he did not strike in isolation. Brother turned against brother, legions sundered along hidden lines of loyalty and ambition. Yet among all the traitors, it was the Sons of Horus who carried the heaviest burden. For it was not only loyalty they abandoned, it was their very reason for being. At Isstvan V, the War Master's ambition ignited a war that shattered the dream of unity. The drop site massacre, the name history would scrawl in blood, was not merely a battle. It was an execution. Loyalist legions, trusting their former brothers, landed to reinforce Horus, only to be annihilated in fire and steel. Death God, Emperor's children, World Eaters, Sons of Horus. They fell upon the Iron Hands, Salamanders, and Raven God with a fury no alien could have matched. The Sons of Horus led the charge. Veterans who had once sung praises to the Emperor now drove chain blades into the hearts of brothers they had fought beside for centuries. On the black sands, they butchered old comrades without hesitation. The salt of friendship was ground under the iron boot of ambition. When the massacre ended, the Loyalists were broken. Only fragments survived to carry warning back to the wider Imperium. It was not enough. The War Master's rebellion spread like wildfire, engulfing sector after sector. Systems pledged their loyalty to Horus, swayed by fear, promises of power, or simple survival. His former allies among the Primarchs either rallied to him or died resisting. Throughout it all, the Sons of Horus served as the vanguard of treachery. Wherever the War Master's banners flew, it was his sons who first struck, his sons who showed the others how betrayal was done, without remorse, without hesitation. The siege of Terra became inevitable. The final gambit of Horus demanded nothing less than the Emperor's death. Earth, the cradle of humanity, would be the proving ground where Horus either claimed the galaxy or perished in infamy. The Sons of Horus prepared for this ultimate war with a fevered determination. On the vengeful spirit, their rituals grew darker, their oaths bloodier. Chaplains, once entrusted with spiritual purity, now led orgiastic rites to chaos. Apothecaries who once preserved life twisted their arts to forge warriors from death and ruin. The Legion's sea-green armor darkened, whether from bloodstains that could not be scoured away or the corruption of the warp itself, none could say. As the fleet gathered above Terra, the War Master's chosen sons were at the heart of it, first onto the killing fields, last to leave them. When the siege began, it was the Sons of Horus who led the brutal assault on the outer defenses. Tower by tower, bastion by bastion, they tore down the walls of the Imperium's might. The shattered peaks of the Himalaysian mountains burned under the fire of their guns. Trillions died as the War Master's forces advanced, grinding through the defenses like an unstoppable tide. The Luna Wolves, that proud name, was now a memory drowned in blood. Yet, for all their ferocity, they could not breach the Emperor's ultimate redoubt, the Imperial Palace. Horus knew time was running out. Loyalist reinforcements were en route. Rogel Dorn, Sanguinius, and the shattered remnants of the Loyalist legions fought with the fanatics' desperation. Every hour saw more traitors dying, more ground lost. The War Master, master strategist that he was, recognized the flaw. He took a terrible gamble. He lowered the shields of the vengeful spirit, issuing a challenge, daring the Emperor to come for him. The Emperor answered. Teleportation beams lanced out from the palace, carrying the Emperor, Sanguinius, and their honor guards directly onto the bridge of the War Master's flagship. The final confrontation loomed. No chronicles fully capture what transpired in that apocalyptic duel. The psychic shockwaves that tore through the immaterium, the crash of power against power, the cries of gods and demons. What is certain is this. Sanguinius, angel of humanity, met Horus in battle first, and Sanguinius fell, murdered by the War Master's hand, his blood staining the deck where the Sons of Horus had once sworn loyalty to the throne. When the Emperor faced Horus, he saw not his son, but a vessel of darkness, bloated with the power of the Four. The battle that followed sundered reality itself. In the end, the Emperor triumphed, but at a cost beyond imagining. The War Master was slain, his body burned to ruin by the Emperor's final, desperate blow. But the Emperor too was broken, carried half-dead to the Golden Throne, where he would sit for all eternity. For the Sons of Horus, the death of Horus was more than the death of a leader. It was the death of their future. When the news reached the fleet, it struck like a hammer blow. In an instant, the cohesion that had held the traitor legions together began to unravel. Some commanders, loyal to Horus but not Chaos, took their forces and fled. Others descended into mindless carnage, looting and pillaging in mad grief. The Sons of Horus stood paralyzed. Their purpose, to raise Horus as emperor, had crumbled. Their faith in Horus's invincibility lay shattered at their feet. Their unity, once unbreakable, began to fracture. Abaddon, first captain, walked the decks of the vengeful spirit in a rage beyond words. His comrades, the surviving Justerin, looked to him for guidance, but no orders came. Not immediately. There was only the howl of betrayal and the cold, bitter understanding that they had gambled everything and lost. The retreat into the Eye of Terror was not a strategic withdrawal. It was a rout. The Sons of Horus, like the other traitor legions, fled before the vengeful loyalists. Not all would survive the passage. Imperial fleets hunted them through the void, merciless in their pursuit. Whole companies were obliterated in the darkness between stars. When the remnants of the Legion reached the Eye, they were not conquerors. They were refugees. In the shifting madness of the Eye, the Sons of Horus sought to regroup, to rebuild. But even there, peace eluded them. Old rivalries, once held in check by loyalty to Horus, erupted into open conflict. Warbands fractured, turned against one another. Promises of unity dissolved into betrayal and slaughter. The death of Horus had not only broken their bodies, it had broken their souls. They interred what remained of Horus's body on the demon world of Melium, building a tomb to honor the father who had led them into damnation. And there they brooded, waiting, plotting, decaying. For the spark of betrayal that had burned so bright on Terra had left them adrift in a darkness even they could scarcely comprehend. The galaxy had changed forever, and for the broken Sons of Horus, the long road into oblivion, or rebirth, had only just begun. The corpse of Horus lay entombed in black stone, deep within the eye of terror. Above the mausoleum, cyclonic storms churned the skies of Melium into a cauldron of blood-red clouds. The world itself, a place where reality frayed and whimpered, bore silent witness to the fall of the greatest champion humanity had ever known. The Sons of Horus gathered there, battered remnants of a shattered dream. No longer the Emperor's bright sword, no longer the vanguard of the War Master's ambition. They had become something else now, hollow, listless, uncertain. In the vast halls of the Tomb Palace, they knelt before Horus's sealed sarcophagus. Their banners, once bright with green and gold, now hung tattered and grimy, scorched by the fires of the siege and their desperate retreat through the void. Among them, a terrible silence reigned. No orders were given. No new conquests were declared. For the first time in their existence, the Legion had no future to march toward. There was only grief. There was only rage. Without Horus, the Sons of Horus were like a severed limb, flailing blindly. The structure that had once made them the most disciplined and feared force in the galaxy dissolved almost overnight. Captains who had once stood shoulder to shoulder now gazed at one another with suspicion and contempt. The bonds of brotherhood strained, and then, in many cases, snapped entirely. The Eye of Terror was not a sanctuary, it was a crucible, a realm of madness where only strength mattered. And in the wake of their defeat, the Sons of Horus became prey. Other traitor legions, once allies in the name of Horus, turned upon them with a savagery fueled by contempt and opportunism. Word-bearers, Emperor's children, Night Lords. Each saw the Sons as vulnerable, weakened, ripe for plunder. The Emperor's children, debased beyond even the darkest imaginings, struck first. Their war bands descended upon Melium like carrion crows, slaughtering and desecrating with maniacal glee. The tomb of Horus was not spared. In a blasphemous act that seared itself into the hearts of the survivors, a warband under Fabius Bile, once the chief apothecary of the Emperor's children, now a creature more parasite than man, infiltrated the Tomb Palace. They stole the body of Horus, dragged it from its place of honor, and spirited it away into the blackened vaults of the Eye. To the Sons of Horus, it was a crime beyond comprehension. Worse than betrayal, worse than defeat. It was the final violation of everything they had once fought for. The despoilment of Horus's remains drove many of them mad. Some threw themselves into the warp, seeking to tear their own souls apart in desperate, futile vengeance. Others turned their wrath inward, falling upon their brothers with bolter and blade. Whole companies fractured into bloody civil wars that raged across Melium's poisoned plains. Without Horus's hand to unite them, the Sons of Horus began to tear themselves to pieces. It was not only the theft of the War Master's body that ignited this collapse. It was the slow, insidious realization that they had nothing left. No future, no glory, no place in the galaxy but as exiles and monsters. Once they had marched with purpose, the destiny of mankind singing in their veins. Now they fought not for conquest, but for survival. In the labyrinth cities of Melium, Warbands carved out petty empires, hoarding slaves, sorcerous relics, and demon-forged weaponry. Former brothers became rivals. Blood ran in rivers down the broken causeways where Horus had once addressed his sons. The Sons of Horus, once unified, unstoppable, became little more than rabid animals, each fighting for scraps in a hell of their own making. Across the Eye of Terror, the name of the Legion became a joke. The other traitor legions who had once bowed their heads in Horus's presence now scorned his sons as the broken, the fatherless, the wolves who howl at shadows. The word-bearers, ever the sly whisperers, began to spread rumors that the Luna Wolves had been cursed by the Emperor himself, their fates sealed by ancient oaths made on long-forgotten battlefields. The Death Guard spoke openly of the Sun's weakness, comparing them to rotting meat. Even the Night Lords, themselves fractured and anarchic, mocked the pitiful state of the once mighty Legion. The Eye of Terror is not a realm that forgives weakness. The Sons of Horus, surrounded by enemies, turned to darker and darker pacts to survive. Some pledged themselves fully to the gods of chaos, seeking power and protection. These warriors were soon lost, transformed into demon princes or broken husks, their souls consumed by the entities they thought they could master. Others rejected the gods, clinging to the old ways, fighting a bitter, doomed struggle to preserve some fragment of their former honor. But Millennium itself seemed to conspire against them. The planet twisted around their despair, its reality warping, its skies bleeding. Great cracks tore open in the ground, spewing forth demonic beasts and noxious gases. The tomb palace of Horus began to decay, its once pristine marble halls collapsing into blackened ruin. The War Master's sepulchre became a monument not to triumph, but to failure. And still the infighting continued. For 100 years and more, the Sons of Horus devoured themselves, warband against warband, brother against brother. Many believed that the Legion would simply fade away, a sad, forgotten footnote in the history of the Long War. And yet, in the ashes of Milem's endless wars, a few embers of true loyalty still burned. Scattered captains, former Just Aerin, rogue sorcerers, and half-mad champions began to whisper a forbidden name. Not Horus, but another, one who had disappeared after the fall of Terra. One who had walked into the Eye alone, shunning both gods and masters. Ezekiel Abaddon, first captain, the Hand of Horus, bearer of the Talon. The one warrior who had fought beside Horus longer than any save the Mournival itself. The rumors spoke of Abaddon gathering strength, of him forging alliances, slaying rivals, bending the strongest survivors of the Sons of Horus to his will. They spoke of a fleet taking shape, black ships, iron banners, a new brotherhood rising from the rot of the old. Not to avenge Horus, not to repeat his mistakes, but to surpass him. In the depths of the Eye of Terror, where even gods dare tread lightly, a shadow was gathering. A shadow not of despair, but of purpose. The long death of the Sons of Horus was nearly complete, and from their corpse something darker was about to be born. Amid the crumbling tombs of Millennium and the blood-soaked ruins of fallen dreams, a new legend began to stir. The Sons of Horus, shattered and rudderless, had fallen into anarchy. Their banners were torn, their oaths broken, their identity reduced to little more than ash drifting on the warp winds. Yet even amid their self-destruction, a figure re-emerged from myth, carrying with him the weight of old glories and the fury of betrayal. Ezekiel Abaddon had returned, the first captain of the Sons of Horus, last of the War Master's chosen Mournival, had been absent during the Legion's slow decline. He had watched from the shadows, gathering strength, weighing the hearts of the scattered remnants. When the time was right, he did not come with pleas. He came with fire and blood, One by one, he crushed the petty warlords who had dared to call themselves heirs of Horus. Those who bent the knee were welcomed back into a brotherhood reforged. Those who resisted were obliterated, their names erased, their banners burned before the remnants of their followers. Abaddon did not offer redemption. He offered purpose. He spoke of vengeance not only against the Imperium, but against those who had mocked the Sons of Horus, who had defiled the War Master's legacy. He would not allow the memory of their legion to rot in humiliation. Yet, even as he began to rekindle the loyalty of the disillusioned, word reached him of a final, unforgivable outrage. Fabius Bile, the twisted apothecary of the Emperor's children, had not merely stolen Horus's corpse. He had used it. Through foul experiments in secret vaults hidden deep within the eye, Bile had crafted a clone of Horus, a perverse recreation, a mockery of the man who had once been the Emperor's favored son. And worse still, this false Horus lived. Rumors whispered that the clone had gathered followers, that he wore the trappings of command, that he spoke to war bands of a new crusade. He offered the desperate A dream, the rebirth of the Great Crusade under his rule. For Abaddon, it was a heresy beyond measure. Horus was dead. His death was a wound carved into the stars themselves. No resurrection could undo what had been lost. To see his memory twisted into a hollow puppet, that could not stand. Abaddon gathered his most loyal warriors, men who had survived the Eye's long madness, by wit and fury alone. Veterans like Falcus Kibre, his brutal brother-in-arms, and Iskandar Kaon, the sorcerer who had once been the War Master's seer. The vengeful spirit, that vast, wounded Leviathan, was roused once more from its slumber in the warp. Its ancient reactors throbbed with life, its gun decks shook free centuries of dust. The first captain's fleet took to the void, a spear cast into the heart of the Eye of Terror. Their destination was Harmony. Once a shining world of the Imperial past, Harmony had long since fallen into nightmare. Under Bile's experiments, the planet had been twisted into a grotesque parody of itself. Spires of bone and metal stabbed the sky, and rivers of liquefied flesh ran through the poisoned valleys. It was there, amidst shrieking choirs of the damned, that the clone of Horus held court. As the vengeful spirit entered Harmony's orbit, the skies split apart with the roar of ancient guns. Mutant warbands, corrupted by Bile's experiments, rose in defense of their false master. But against the fury of Abaddon's chosen, they were as dust before the storm. The boarding parties struck like thunderbolts, carving through the defenses with bolter and blade. Across flesh-grown fortresses and shrieking machine warrens, they advanced, methodical, relentless, unstoppable. Abaddon led the assault personally. He wielded the Talon of Horus, the ancient gauntlet once worn by the War Master himself, its claws crackling with warp lightning. In his other hand, the demon blade Drachnien whispered its terrible hunger. Every step he took was a statement of intent. No mockery of Horus would be allowed to exist, not while he still drew breath. The final confrontation took place aboard the Flesh Market, a grotesque fortress grown from the tissue of a dead titan, orbiting Harmony like a bloated moon. There, in a throne room stitched together from the skin of fallen champions, the clone awaited him. At first glance, the resemblance was perfect. The clone wore armor fashioned in the style of the Sons of Horus, complete with the Eye of Horus emblazoned proudly across its breastplate. His features were those of the War Master, the same regal countenance, the same terrible majesty. But the eyes betrayed him. Where Horus had once radiated the brutal certainty of destiny, the creature on the Flesh Market's throne radiated only hollow mimicry, a puppet wearing the mask of a god. As Abaddon approached, the clone rose to greet him. He spoke words of brotherhood, of restoration. of a second great crusade, this time free of the Emperor's chains. He promised Abaddon a place at his side, a throne of power at the apex of a new empire. Abaddon listened in silence. Then, with contemptuous finality, he answered, "You are not my father," he said. "You are nothing." With a roar that shook the corrupted halls of the flesh market, Abaddon hurled himself forward. The duel was brief and brutal. The clone fought well, perhaps too well, its movements eerily echoing the real Horus. But Abaddon's rage was a furnace that could not be quenched. Blow after blow rained down, driving the false war master to his knees. At the last, Abaddon raised the talon of Horus high. In a single shattering strike, he tore the heart from the clone's chest. The creature gasped, reaching out with a hand that trembled in disbelief. It tried to speak, some plea, some last lie, but the words died on its tongue. Abaddon drove Drachnyen through its throat, silencing it forever. The false Horus collapsed, twitching, and then was still. As the clone's body dissolved into foul vapors, Abaddon stood over the corpse, breathing heavily. Around him, his warriors gathered, the blood of their enemies dripping from their armor. A silence settled over the chamber. It was done. The last vestige of the War Master's weakness, the false hope of his return, was annihilated. Abaddon turned to his warriors and spoke. "We are the Sons of Horus no longer," he said. "We are the future. We are the storm." And thus, amidst the ruins of harmony, the first true ember of the Black Legion was kindled, not as broken remnants of a failed rebellion, but as the architects of a new war, a war that would never end. The corpse of the false Horus dissolved into ash, but the death it symbolized went far deeper. It was not just the end of a mockery, it was the severing of an identity, a final, deliberate burial of the past. The Sons of Horus had lived too long in the shadow of a dead god. Their failure at Terra, their shame on Maelium, their descent into anarchy, all had been chains, binding them to a legacy they could never reclaim. Now those chains lay broken, and at the heart of that shattering stood Ezekiel Abaddon. In the aftermath of the flesh market's burning, Abaddon gathered his captains aboard the Vengeful Spirit. Not all had followed him willingly. Some had bowed only because their war bands had been shattered. Others had seen no better option than to fall in line behind the strongest blade. Yet, as they assembled in the cavernous hall of Lupercal, with its cracked marble and tarnished banners, they saw something different in the man who now addressed them. Abaddon did not kneel to the past. He did not weep for lost glories. He stood tall, clad in blackened Terminator plate, the talon of Horus crackling at his side, Drachnyen whispering against his back. In every line of his scarred face burned a terrible certainty, a vision of the future not as it had been, but as it would be forged anew. When he spoke, his voice carried like a war horn across the deck. "The Sons of Horus are dead," he declared, each word a hammer blow against the walls of tradition and regret. "They died with our father. They died when weakness entered his heart." A ripple of unease passed through the assembled captains. For all their rage, Horus's name still carried weight. To hear him spoken of with such cold finality was like tasting poison. Abaddon cared nothing for their discomfort. "The past is a corpse that drags us into the grave," he continued. "I will not bear its weight any longer. Nor will you." Around him, the banners of the Sons of Horus, tattered, faded, hung like shrouds. Abaddon lifted his bolt pistol and fired. One after another, the banners burst into flames, the green and gold sigils of a dead legion consumed by hungry fire. The captains watched in silence as the embers swirled around them, casting the chamber into blood-red gloom. "When next we march to war," Abaddon said, "it will not be under Horus's eye. It will not be in the name of a broken ideal." He turned slowly, meeting the gaze of every warlord, every sorcerer, every bruised and battered remnant who had survived the Eye's long madness. "We will wear the black," he said. "We will be reborn in darkness, stronger, hungrier, free." A murmur rose from the assembly, half prayer, half growl. Abaddon smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "This is the Black Legion," he said, "and I am its war master." No one dared to challenge the proclamation, not Falcus Kibre, grim and brutal as ever, not Iskandar Khayon, whose sorcerous sight glimpsed the storm building around Abaddon's soul. Not the myriad lesser captains and warlords, each one hardened by endless war, yet wise enough to recognize a force greater than themselves when it stood before them. The blackening of the Legion was not a mere change of armor or banners. It was a ritual of rebirth. Over the following weeks, the forges of the vengeful spirit burned without cease. Artificers stripped the green and gold from battle plate, bathing armor in warp-infused oils, scarring it with sigils of new allegiance. The Eye of Horus remained, but it was no longer a symbol of Horus Lupercal. It was something older, something deeper, a sign of the ever-watching gods beyond mortal comprehension. The black they wore was not the black of mourning. It was the black of the void, the color of predation, of inevitability. With every stroke of the artificer's brush, with every whispered oath sworn over newly consecrated armor, the Black Legion was forged anew. Yet Abaddon's vision went further still. He sent emissaries across the Eye of Terror, grim heralds clad in obsidian, bearing a simple message. The Black Legion welcomes all who would cast off the shackles of the past. From the broken legions came the outcasts, the disillusioned, the ambitious. Sons of Mortarion who no longer wished to rot in Nurgle's embrace. Betrayers from the Night Lords seeking greater spoils. Renegades from the Emperor's children, sickened by endless hedonism. Even word-bearers, sick of the endless preaching of their own kind, came to hear the call. Abaddon welcomed them all, so long as they bent the knee to him and abandoned the petty rivalries of old. There would be no more divisions of gene lineage, no more sacred relics of primarchs worshipped as gods. In the Black Legion there was only strength, loyalty, and the long war, and it was a war without end. From the Eye's heart, Abaddon forged his armies. Grand fleets took shape, murder-class cruisers and infernal battleships, outfitted with the salvaged wrecks of 1,000 broken worlds. Warbands, once squabbling for scraps, now marched under a single black banner, disciplined and ravenous. Their creed was simple. The Imperium must fall, not for revenge alone, not to reclaim lost honor, but because the Imperium, the golden dream of the Emperor, was a lie, a rotting edifice propped up by fear and stagnation. Abaddon promised a future forged in fire and strength, a galaxy cleansed of hypocrisy, and at its heart, a new order born in darkness, rising from the ashes of 1,000 dead empires. The War Master of Chaos did not demand worship. He demanded results. He demanded blood. And he offered his warriors something no god could truly promise: purpose. One by one, the broken remnants of the traitor legions found themselves drawn into his orbit, some willingly, some through conquest. But all were bound to a common fate. The rise of the Black Legion marked not merely the rebirth of a force. It marked the beginning of a new era in the Long War. An era not of desperate raids or futile rebellions. An era of systematic, relentless annihilation. From the howling warp storms of the Eye of Terror to the bleeding frontier worlds of the Imperium, a dark tide began to gather. The Black Legion would not be a footnote in the galaxy's chronicles. It would be the storm that ended history itself. And in the blackness of their armor, in the crimson of their blades, in the cold fire of their endless hatred, They would write a saga that no loyalist could ever erase. The Black Dawn had risen, and the galaxy would never see light again. The halls of the vengeful spirit trembled as new life surged through its ancient bones. Once the proud flagship of Horus Lupercal, the vengeful spirit had witnessed the glories of the Great Crusade, the atrocities of the heresy, and the despair of defeat. Now, under the command of Ezekiel Abaddon, it breathed once more, a living monument to war. But the ship was not enough. The fleets gathering in the Eye of Terror, the war bands reforging themselves under the Black Legion's banner. These were not yet a crusade. They were potential, raw and furious, needing purpose to ignite into true devastation. Abaddon knew this better than anyone. Purpose was the currency of empires. Without it, the Black Legion would wither as the Sons of Horus had. A brief, bitter spark, snuffed out by infighting and decay. Standing alone in the bridge's great observatory, Abaddon gazed into the writhing madness of the Eye of Terror. Behind him, the bridge crew, creatures of flesh and machine, veterans and mutants alike, maintained their silent vigil, awaiting his command. His black-armored gauntlet clenched into a fist. The stars seemed to mock him. Millions of worlds, billions of souls, all still shackled to the rotting dream of the Emperor. Terra still stood, the golden throne still endured, and the Imperium, battered and bleeding though it was, refused to fall. It was an affront beyond endurance, a crime that demanded rectification. Abaddon knew that mere raids, no matter how savage, would never be enough. The Imperium had survived rebellions, alien invasions, and demonic incursions before. If he was to bring it to ruin, it could not be with fleeting strikes. It had to be a war without end, a war so vast, so consuming, that the Imperium would exhaust itself simply trying to survive. A long war. The term surfaced in his mind, unbidden, and he embraced it. The Long War. A campaign that would outlast empires. A war fought not for the petty goal of territorial conquest, but for the very soul of mankind. To shatter its illusions, to tear down its false gods, to crush its hopes into dust and scatter them on the void winds. But it was not enough for him alone to believe. He needed his legion, his warlords, his captains, his dark brothers, to believe as well. Thus, he summoned them. In the re-sanctified hall of Lupercal, now draped in black banners bearing the new Eye of Chaos sigil, the captains of the Black Legion gathered. They came from every corner of the Eye, warlords with armor etched in runes of allegiance, sorcerers wreathed in ghost light, demon priests whose oaths to the gods burned in every breath. They knelt before no one, not even Abaddon, but they came, drawn by the gravitational pull of something greater than themselves. When Abaddon entered the hall, silence fell like a thunderclap. He strode among them like a living force of nature, the talon of Horus flexing at his side, his black cloak trailing behind him like the wings of some vast predatory beast. He climbed the dais at the center of the chamber and turned to face them. No herald announced him, no choir sang his praises. He needed no such hollow ceremony. He was the War Master, and that title spoke louder than any trumpet. Abaddon drew his sword and drove its point into the stone at his feet. The sound echoed through the hall like a gunshot. "I have called you here not for old loyalties," he began, his voice low, cutting through the silence like a blade. "Not for memories of past glories, nor for oaths sworn to dead gods and fallen masters." He looked into the eyes of each captain, each sorcerer, each demon host. "I have called you because there is a war yet to win." Murmurs rippled through the hall. Some scoffed, others leaned forward, hungry for more. "The Imperium stands," Abaddon said, "because it has been allowed to stand, because the sons of the great betrayal allowed themselves to be scattered, divided, broken by pride and old hatreds." He lifted his gauntleted fist. "No more. The words crashed across the chamber like a tidal wave. No more petty squabbles, no more chains to dead Primarchs, no more living in the ruins of our failure. He pointed toward the flickering hololithic display of the galaxy spinning above the dais. We will fight a war not for a throne, nor for hollow vengeance, but to scour this galaxy clean. He bared his teeth in a grin that had nothing of joy in it. To destroy the Imperium not in one battle, but piece by piece. To bleed it dry. To watch its stars gutter and fade. He leaned forward, his voice a snarl of iron and fire. We will bring the long war. A roar answered him. It was not the orderly chant of a loyalist army, but the primal scream of warriors who had been given purpose once more. A cry of hatred, centuries old. A vow of destruction whispered from demon to mortal, from champion to slave. The War Council formed that night. The first dark apostles of the Black Legion were anointed, their flesh seared with the eye of chaos. The newly sworn Ezekarian, Abaddon's inner circle of trusted captains, took their places at his side, each bearing the black sigil of the Legion emblazoned across their hearts. Fleets were pledged, resources pooled, ancient weapons, relics of the Dark Mechanicum, of forgotten civilizations, of Xeno's empires long dead, were unearthed and readied for war. Every plan, every maneuver, every whispered rite served a single goal, the beginning of a war that would never truly end. It was not conquest Abaddon sought, it was annihilation. The Imperium would crumble not because it was conquered, but because it would bleed itself dry fighting him, spending its soldiers, its ships, its hope, until nothing remained but hollow shells and dead worlds. The gods of chaos watched and laughed. They had blessed Horus, and he had failed. Now they blessed Abaddon, not with gifts of mutation or demonhood, but with opportunity. Opportunity he intended to seize. On the command decks of the Vengeful Spirit, the new banners of the Black Legion unfurled for the first time, black on black, a crimson eye glaring out into the void. It was not a symbol of Horus's ambition. It was a warning. The long war had begun, and Ezekiel Abaddon, War Master of Chaos, Despoiler of Worlds, had sworn an oath that no force in the galaxy would ever forget. An oath written in fire, an oath written in blood, an oath written across the stars themselves. The Eye of Terror convulsed like a wounded beast as the storm of the Black Legion unfurled. Across the warp-touched realms where nightmares reigned, the scattered warbands of chaos felt the shift. It was not the mindless rage of another petty uprising. It was something deeper, colder, more deliberate. A purpose had been forged in the darkness, and it now stretched its hand toward the living galaxy. The first spear point of the Long War would not be a scattered raid or a single world's fall. It would be a crusade. A black crusade, the first of many. Abaddon did not waste time. Every moment spent lingering gave the Imperium a chance to heal, to rally its endless hosts, and seal its wounds. He knew that the initial blow must be swift and devastating, a statement that would reverberate across the stars. He chose his target with care. Not Terra, not yet. That prize would come in time. He would strike at Cadia, the fortress world that barred the Eye of Terror's throat, the gate through which all must pass if they would reach the heart of the Imperium. Cadia was no ordinary planet. It was a bulwark against chaos, a sentinel that had withstood 1,000 lesser assaults. Its people were bred for war. Its skies bristled with orbital defense platforms and void shields. Its surface was a latticework of bunkers, trench networks, and mighty bastions. But no fortress was invulnerable, and Abaddon intended to show the galaxy that even the strongest walls could fall when faced with the true will of chaos. The Black Legion gathered for war. From the eye's churning depths rose fleets blacker than the void. Murder-class cruisers and battle barges daubed with war paint and blood, twisted constructs of the dark mechanicum whose machine spirits howled in blasphemous tongues, vast armies of traitor Astartes, cultist hordes, demon engines, and twisted abominations born of sorcery and nightmare. The scale of the mustering was unlike anything the Imperium had seen since the heresy itself. Abaddon stood at the helm of it all, a dark messiah preaching not redemption, but ruin. When the Black Legion struck, it was without mercy. The initial assault came like a tidal wave. Warp rifts tore open across the Cadian Gate, disgorging nightmare fleets. World after world around Cadia was overrun, their defenders caught unprepared by the sheer ferocity of the attack. On Cadia itself, alarms blared across hive cities and fortress monasteries. The Cadians, born and bred to face the horrors of the Eye, did not break. They mobilized with ruthless efficiency, their regiments mustering in endless ranks beneath the looming banners of the Emperor. Imperial Navy battle groups surged to intercept the Black Legion's armada. The void burned. In the shadow of Cadia's ancient pylons, those enigmatic structures whose true purpose even the Mechanicus scarcely understood, space itself howled and twisted as fleets clashed. Macro-cannon fire and lance beams tore through the darkness. Boarding torpedoes hammered into hulls, disgorging berserkers and kill teams. Entire cruisers were torn apart, their remains raining down as molten wreckage upon the fortress world below. The vengeful spirit led the assault. Ancient and vengeful, the battleship cut a path of devastation through the Imperial fleet, its guns roaring in wrath. Abaddon personally led the boarding actions, teleporting with his elite into the heart of enemy vessels. Where he walked, death followed. Entire ship crews were slaughtered in minutes, their bridges reduced to smoking ruins beneath his merciless advance. Yet the Imperium did not yield. The defenders of Cadia, hardened by centuries of ceaseless vigilance, fought back with grim determination. They turned the orbital defenses into killing fields, sacrificing fleets and regiments alike to bleed the invaders dry. For every Chaos ship that fell, 2 more surged forward. For every fortress that was overrun, another rose to meet the enemy's advance. The battle dragged into a brutal, grinding stalemate. It was not the swift decapitation strike Abaddon had envisioned. It was a war of attrition, a contest of wills played out across void and soil alike. But Abaddon did not falter. He understood now, this would not be a single blow that shattered the Imperium's defenses. It would be a hammering, unceasing, wearing down their strength across countless battles. The seeds of the long war had been sown, and seeds needed time to grow. Even as the siege dragged on, Abaddon claimed his prize. In the vaults of Cadia's lesser moons, hidden beneath ancient Mechanicus catacombs, he uncovered a relic long sought, a blade forged not by mortal hands, but by the powers of the Immaterium itself. Drachnien, the demon blade that would become his constant companion. It was no simple weapon. It was a creature of hunger, a shard of chaos given terrible form. It whispered in 1,000 voices, promising annihilation, pleading for release. Abaddon took it without hesitation. Where Horus had been seduced by the gods, Abaddon would be their master. Drachnien would be a tool, a means to an end, not a chain around his neck. With the demon blade at his side and the First Black Crusade solidifying his legend, Abaddon withdrew from Cadia. He left ruin in his wake, shattered orbital defenses, decimated fleets, millions of dead. But he did not claim the planet. He did not need to. Victory for Abaddon was never measured in the taking of territory. It was measured in the bleeding of his enemy. Cadia, though battered, still stood. But it had been wounded, gravely, permanently. The Imperium had been forced to reveal its vulnerability. worlds around the Cadian Gate, once bastions of order, now smoldered or lay abandoned to the horrors of the Eye. The reputation of the Black Legion, once scorned as the broken remnants of a failed rebellion, was reforged in blood and fire. The galaxy understood now. Chaos had a War Master once more, and this War Master would not make the mistakes of Horus. He would not squander his strength in one reckless gamble. He would fight a war not of months or years, but of millennia. He would bleed the Imperium dry, one world at a time. The long war had begun, and in the shadows of the Cadian Gate, among the wreckage of 1,000 broken dreams, the Black Legion gathered once more, ready to strike again and again, until nothing remained but ash and echoes. The fires of the First Black Crusade had barely cooled when Abaddon turned his gaze toward new prey. He understood what many in the Eye of Terror had failed to grasp. Terror alone would not bring down the Imperium. Raids and raids again would bleed it, yes, but not break it. True victory demanded something more brutal, something more symbolic. It demanded the death of heroes. Heroes were the lifeblood of the Imperium, icons to rally behind, myths made flesh. Cut them down and entire worlds could crumble in despair. Abaddon chose his next victims with a butcher's precision. The Blood Angels, a chapter born of Sanguinius himself, beloved across the Imperium for their nobility and martial glory. Their names still stirred hope in the hearts of humanity, even after the long darkness of the heresy. Abaddon knew if he could strike them down, if he could shatter even one great chapter of the Adeptus Astartes, the tremors would echo from one side of the galaxy to the other. The target was set. Makan. A world of crimson sands and labyrinthine canyons, Makan was a shrine world in all but name, home to relics of the Great Crusade, ancient cathedrals honoring Sanguinius, and a garrison of blood angels who had made it their sacred duty to protect the pilgrims traveling there. To Abaddon, it was perfect. It was a wound waiting to be torn open. He unleashed the Black Legion upon it without warning. The skies above Makan split apart as the vengeful spirit led an armada of demon-infused battle barges and murder cruisers into orbit. In their wake followed the true horror, drop pods forged from broken shrines and demon-screaming dreadclaws that hammered down into the deserts, disgorging black-armored killers into the dunes. The Blood Angels responded with swift valor. Captain Acreon, a hero whose deeds were already becoming legend within the chapter, mustered every warrior at his command. The first clashes were apocalyptic. Assault squads of Blood Angels, soaring on wings of flame, met the Black Legion in the canyon mazes. Chainswords howled, and the sands of Makan were painted with the blood of gods and monsters alike. It was a battle of rage against fury. The Blood Angels, heirs to Sanguinius's terrible beauty, fought with a brilliance that seemed almost divine. The Black Legion answered with a hatred honed sharper than any blade, a venomous black fury that had no room left for pity or remorse. But Abaddon had not come simply to defeat them. He had come to erase them. He descended upon the battlefield personally, leading his elite Terminator bodyguard, the Justerine Reborn, into the thick of the fighting. Where he went, formations of Blood Angels shattered. Power swords snapped against the talon of Horus. Thunder hammers bounced uselessly from his demon-wreathed armor. Not even the dreadnoughts, ancient heroes of 10,000 years, could withstand his assault. Their sarcophagi split open, and their noble occupants torn from within. Captain Acreon saw the tide turning, but refused to yield. Gathering his honor guard, he launched a counteroffensive, aiming directly at Abaddon's throat. It was a desperate gambit, but a noble one, the kind that might have turned the day if fate had been kinder. It was not. The final duel took place beneath the shattered spires of the Cathedral of Sanguinius. Abaddon and Acreon clashed amidst the ruins, the Blood Angel fighting with every ounce of strength, every whispered prayer to his Primarch. It was a battle that shook the desert, that burned itself into the memories of those few who survived to tell of it. Acreon's blade sang a song of duty, of hope. Abaddon's talon roared a hymn of annihilation. Blow for blow, they battered each other, warriors from two broken dreams. But Abaddon was not there to honor the past. He was there to destroy it. With a final, brutal blow, he smashed through Acreon's guard and drove the talon into the captain's chest. The Blood Angel gasped, blood bubbling from his lips as Abaddon lifted him from the ground with the talon's barbed claws. Acreon struggled even then, trying to strike one last blow. But Abaddon twisted his gauntlet, and the Blood Angel fell limp. The sands drank deep of his blood. Abaddon did not allow the corpse dignity. He ripped the winged helm from Acreon's head and cast it into the flames that licked at the ruined cathedral. Around him, his warriors followed his example. They butchered the fallen Blood Angels, tearing the gene seed from their bodies to deny their chapter any chance of rebirth. They desecrated the shrines, smashing statues of Sanguinius, burning relics, and grinding holy tomes into the dust. When the slaughter was done, nothing remained of Makan's glory. Only ash, only silence, only the black banners of the Despoiler, whipping in the desert winds. The fall of Makan sent shockwaves through the Imperium. The Blood Angels, stricken by the loss, vowed vengeance. But vengeance could not undo what had been done. The myth of invincibility surrounding the Emperor's angels cracked that day, and Abaddon, ever the architect of despair, saw opportunity in the widening fractures. He had proven a point not just to the Imperium, but to the Black Legion itself. They were not merely scavengers of glory past, they were the reapers of hope. Every cathedral they burned, every hero they slaughtered, every world they left hollowed out by terror, these were not random acts of savagery. They were steps on a deliberate path, the path of the Long War. Abaddon gathered his commanders on the broken sands of Makan. Under the dying light of the twin suns, he spoke to them, not in the high, soaring language of ancient oaths, but in the brutal, unrelenting words of a warlord who saw the truth of the galaxy. There are no heroes, he said, only corpses waiting to fall. And with that, the Black Legion departed Makan, leaving behind a world stripped of its spirit, a graveyard where once angels had walked. The galaxy, watching in horror, realized a grim truth. The Black Crusades had only just begun, and the Black Legion was only growing stronger. While the galaxy reeled from the shock of Makan's desecration, Abaddon turned his gaze inward, beyond the battles, beyond the immediate bloodshed. Victory on the battlefield was only the surface of his ambition. The true conquest would be one of reality itself. For decades, centuries, perhaps even longer, Abaddon had been weaving a plan so vast, so insidious, that few among his own followers even glimpsed its full scale. It was called the Crimson Path. It had begun not with armies, but with whispers. Whispers learned from demons who gnawed at the edges of reality, from sorcerers who dared to read the forbidden codices of dead civilizations, from the tortured prophecies of the Chthonian warlocks and the mad screams of possessed psychers. The Eye of Terror, that maelstrom of raw warp energy, was not a natural wound. It had been shaped, pulled open during the heresy's cataclysm. And if another wound, a greater one, could be torn into the materium, if the walls between real space and the immaterium could be broken wide enough, the Imperium would not merely fall, it would be drowned in the tides of chaos. Abaddon's raids, his Black Crusades, his seemingly random strikes. They were never random at all. Each campaign, each battle, served a secret, hidden purpose to weaken the barriers holding reality intact. The pylons of Cadia were the first step. Those ancient monoliths, half buried in the planet's bedrock, had stood since before humanity had first reached for the stars. The Adeptus Mechanicus revered them as relics, but understood nothing of their true function. Abaddon did. The pylons were a bulwark, a dam holding back the rising tides of the warp. If they could be broken, destabilized, or corrupted, the eye would expand, reality would fray, and into that widening wound, the Black Legion could pour the legions of hell itself. Cadia had withstood his first assault, barely, but the damage had been done. Hairline fractures spiderwebbed the psychic defenses. Warp storms grew fiercer. The stars near the gate flickered with instability. It was only the beginning. The Crimson Path demanded more. Across the galaxy, hidden beneath forgotten catacombs, locked within fortified temples, scattered across the bones of extinct empires, similar pylons existed. Some were active, glowing with ancient light. Some slumbered, dormant, awaiting reawakening. Others had already begun to fail, their protections corroded by the slow entropy of time. Abaddon's forces moved to find them all, not through open warfare, not always. Open war drew too much attention, too many Imperial reinforcements. Instead, the Black Legion seeded 1,000 smaller fires across the galaxy. Cults arose on a dozen shrine worlds, chanting secret litanies that frayed the veil. Raiding parties infiltrated Mechanicus strongholds, sabotaging ancient machines whose loss would not be understood until it was far too late. Even among the alien races, Abaddon sowed discord. He encouraged the orcs to overrun sectors guarding pylons, knowing they would destroy without understanding. He manipulated Eldar prophecies to lure their warriors into desperate defenses, exhausting their dwindling strength. In the Segmentum Obscurus, entire fleets vanished into the warp, lost amid storms of unnatural violence. In the eastern fringe, the stars themselves seemed to grow sick, their light dimming beneath clouds of psychic rot. Every fallen bastion, every corrupted shrine, every detonated pylon pushed the galaxy closer to the brink. The Imperium, as bloated and sluggish as ever, barely noticed. To its lords of terror, the Black Crusades were seen as little more than predictable surges of chaos aggression. Inconvenient, bloody, but manageable. They did not see the pattern. They did not understand that every battle, won or lost, served a purpose far beyond immediate destruction. The Crimson Path wound through the galaxy like a knife carving deep into flesh, unseen until the body collapsed. Within the Black Legion, few knew the full scope of the plan. Even Abaddon's closest captains understood only fragments. Falcus Kibre, the brutal enforcer, knew only that their wars had deeper aims. Iskandar Kayon, master of sorceries, suspected more and grew wary, but even he could not grasp the full magnitude of Abaddon's vision. In truth, the Despoiler trusted no one with the totality of the scheme. Not the dark gods, whose games he played but never fully embraced. Not his demonic allies, who craved only the endless expansion of their own domains. Not even his human lieutenants, who still bore the scars of ambition and betrayal. Abaddon carried the burden of the Crimson Path alone. He had seen what Horus could not, that chaos was a tide, not a master to be served. It was a force to be directed, manipulated, wielded like a sword rather than worn like chains. If he could tear open the galaxy's heart, if he could drown its ordered stars in the sea of madness, then he would be not merely the architect of the Imperium's fall. He would be the creator of a new galaxy, one where the strong ruled without pretense, where gods walked openly, where humanity, stripped of its lies and weakness, would finally claim the destiny denied it since the dawn of time, and he would stand at its center, not as a puppet of the warp, not as a relic of the past, but as the true War Master of Chaos, sovereign over a galaxy remade in his image. The Crimson Path was not merely destruction, it was creation. Creation through annihilation. Already the signs multiplied, warp rifts widened, worlds once stable now flickered like dying candles. Astropaths screamed in their sleep, dreaming of seas of blood and skies split with iron teeth. And still the Imperium fought its endless blind wars against Xenos, against rebellion, against themselves, never realizing that the ground beneath them was dissolving. When the final blow came, when the Eye of Terror burst its banks and spilled across the stars, they would understand. They would look back across the millennia of war and see the truth, that it had never been about a single battle, never about a single world. It had been about all of it, about the death of reality itself. And by then, it would be far too late. In the heart of the vengeful spirit, past shattered cathedrals and bleeding engines, there stood a chamber untouched by time or mercy. It had no name on the ship's schematics, no marker known to mortal cartographers. The warriors of the Black Legion called it only one thing: Lupercal's court. It was here, in this sanctum forged from the bones of loyalty and betrayal, that Abaddon summoned his warlords. The Black Legion had grown beyond a single man's reach. Its fleets stretched across systems. Its warbands counted among them champions older than most worlds, each bearing the scars and glories of 1,000 battles. Its armies were no longer just remnants of Horus's broken sons, but an empire of renegades and monsters, bound by a single will. That will was Abaddon's, but even a war master needed instruments through which to wield his growing dominion. Thus he created the Ezekarian, not a council of equals, for there were no equals to Abaddon, but a brotherhood of terror, loyalty, and ambition. Warriors he trusted not because they were pure, there was no purity left in the Eye of Terror, but because they understood that unity under him was the only path to survival and victory. Each member of the Ezekarion was a warlord in his own right, commanding armies that could sack subsectors, fleets that could level continents. Each had been tested in fire and darkness before being given a seat. They were handpicked, broken, and reforged by Abaddon's will, like blades hammered on the anvil of chaos. They were not friends. They were weapons. On the appointed night, as the Eye's mad light pulsed red across the vengeful spirit's bridge, they gathered. Falcus Kibre, once Justerin, always brute, his Terminator armor still bearing the scars of Terra's dying screams. Iskandar Kayon, sorcerer and schemer, whose eyes saw both the paths of men and the eddies of the warp beyond mortal sight. Telemachon Lyris, known as the Reaver, a predator whose hunger for conquest burned brighter than any star. Garadon, lord of the blackened hand, whose whispers could collapse alliances and ignite civil wars without a single blade drawn. And others, shadows whose names were lost to sane history, but whose deeds would be carved into the bones of a dying galaxy. They assembled in silence, standing before the basalt throne where Abaddon waited. No words of ceremony were spoken, no oaths were demanded. Their presence was oath enough. Abaddon rose and the silence deepened. The talon of Horus gleamed in the gloom, each claw dripping with the ghosts of slain heroes. The demon blade Drachnian pulsed at his side, eager to taste fresh ruin. He did not ask them for loyalty. He commanded it. "You are the heart of the Legion," he said, his voice carrying across the chamber like the toll of a funeral bell. "The fists by which our will shall be made manifest, the blades that shall carve the long war across the stars." Each man listened, not as subjects, but as hunters recognizing their pack alpha. "You will have your wars," Abaddon promised. "You will have your spoils. You will drown in blood and fire and glory." He paused, letting the silence crackle like a live wire. but you will have it under my command, under my vision." He pointed to the ceiling, where a vast hololithic map of the galaxy shimmered into being. The Imperium, vast and bloated, stretched across it, but cracks spiderwebbed its surface, fractures only he could see. "We will strike here," he said, gesturing to Segmentum Obscurus, where the wounds of Cadia still festered. "And here," he growled, pointing to the eastern fringe, where Imperial control grew thin. "And here," he said at last, gesturing to Terra itself, "the ultimate prize. Not today, not tomorrow, but someday. A war without end. A war fought not to win swiftly, but to bleed, to shatter, to grind down until the Imperium collapsed under its own weight." The Ezekarian understood, not because they were philosophers or visionaries, but because they were predators. And predators understood the slow hunt, the patient kill. One by one they knelt, not out of reverence, out of acknowledgement. They recognized in Abaddon the truth they had denied in themselves. Only through unity, only through relentless, focused hatred, could they achieve the destiny that Horus had squandered. The court was sealed. The pacts were made in blood and blade. From that night onward, the Ezekarian were more than captains. They were the War Master's wrath made flesh. Each was given dominion over a portion of the Black Legion's growing forces. Each swore to carry out the long war, no matter the cost. Beneath them, warbands were reorganized into battle groups known as the Hosts, each a hammer of the War Master's will. The first host, commanded by Kibra, specialized in brutal planetary assaults, tearing through bastions and fortresses with overwhelming force. The second host, under Kion, moved like ghosts, waging wars of sorcery and subterfuge, turning allies against each other and opening warp rifts behind enemy lines. The third host, led by Lyrus, became the vanguard, striking deep into Imperial space, sowing terror that spread like wildfire. Dozens more rose, each a shard of the Black Legion's Black Star, each a weapon honed for a different form of devastation. The galaxy was not ready. The Imperium clung to its superstitions, believing that chaos was disorganized, divided, ruled only by petty gods and madmen. Abaddon would teach them otherwise. He had reforged the broken shards of the Sons of Horus into something far more terrifying, not the mournful echoes of a fallen dream, but the architects of the galaxy's end. The Ezekarian returned to their fleets, to their armies, to their campaigns. They carried with them a single message. The Black Legion was no longer a fractured brotherhood, scavenging among the ruins of the past. It was a black flame rising, a shadow that would drown the stars. And at its center in Lupercal's court, Abaddon watched the galaxy turn, patient, unyielding, certain. The long war had only just begun, and he now had the instruments he needed to play its final terrible symphony. The Eye of Terror was a cauldron of infinite hunger. Beyond the broken realms of reality, 4 powers reigned supreme. Gods not born of flesh, but of raw emotion. Entities of madness, cruelty, ambition, decay. Khorne, Tzeentch, Nurgle, Slanesh, the ruinous powers. And it was in their boiling realm that the Black Legion made its home, threading a narrow path between servitude and annihilation. Other warlords had sought favor from these gods and paid the price. Mortarion, trapped forever in pestilent decay. Magnus, the puppet of arcane schemes. Fulgrim, lost in an ecstasy of self-destruction. Perturabo, shackled to a fortress prison of his own bitterness. Their legions, too, had fractured under the weight of their patron's demands. But Abaddon had learned from their failures. He would not kneel. He would not be chained. The gods had offered him power, and he had taken it. But he had not surrendered himself. It was a razor-thin path, one that few could walk. To accept the gifts of the dark gods without becoming their slave required strength beyond mere physical prowess. It demanded willpower so absolute that not even demons could find purchase in it. The gods, for all their rage and pride, respected strength, and so they watched Abaddon with hungry eyes, each seeking to make him their champion, and each failing again and again. Khorne, the blood god, sent emissaries bearing axes wreathed in fire and promises of endless conquest. Abaddon accepted the gifts, the sharpened strength, the mastery of slaughter, but refused the collar that came with them. In battle, his rage was a wildfire. He rent his enemies limb from limb with the talon of Horus, cleaving through armor, flesh, and bone alike. But when the battle ended, he sheathed his rage, mastering it as a sword, not a master. Tzeentch, the changer of ways, wove subtle plots around the Despoiler's path, offering visions of galaxies torn apart by endless schemes, of empires reshaped by whispered lies. Abaddon accepted the knowledge, the foresight to outmaneuver imperial tacticians, the cunning to fracture alliances, the insight to see 1,000 moves ahead. But he spat upon the twisting oaths of fate, refusing to become a pawn in an endless game of betrayals. Nurgle, the Lord of Decay, extended his bloated hand, promising Abaddon resilience beyond death, the peace of inevitability, the certainty of unchanging domination. Abaddon accepted the endurance, the iron will to survive the worst the Imperium could hurl against him. But he rejected the stagnation, the acceptance of rot and surrender. He would not endure. He would conquer. Even Slaanesh, the Prince of Excess, sent envoys clad in beauty and terror, offering delights that defied mortal understanding, pleasures that could drown whole civilizations. Abaddon accepted the sharpened instincts, the focus to experience battle, not as chaos, but as pure, perfect expression. But he denied the drowning of self, the descent into mindless indulgence. Pleasure was a weapon, not a master. Again and again the gods tried to claim him. Again and again he used their gifts, and remained free. No other figure in the Long War had achieved such a balance. Demon princes ruled in the eye, monstrous things crowned by the gods' favor. But their will was no longer their own. Abaddon remained mortal, by choice, by defiance. There were times when his warlords questioned his refusal. In whispered councils, some asked why the War Master did not ascend, why he did not accept demonhood and the immortality it offered. They did not understand. To become a demon prince was to surrender final authority. It was to become the pet of the gods, a favored beast bound forever to their whims. Abaddon desired something greater. He desired freedom, the freedom to forge his own destiny, the freedom to command the gods themselves, if necessary. He understood a truth that others had missed. The gods were not masters. They were weapons, powerful, terrible, inconstant, but weapons nonetheless. And weapons could be wielded. This philosophy shaped everything he did. When the Black Legion struck, it did not do so blindly, in the name of some patron deity. It moved with purpose, serving the Long War first and foremost. When demons were summoned, they were bound to Abaddon's will, unleashed only when it served his designs. When pacts were made, they were bargains of necessity, not covenants of worship. The gods raged at his audacity, but they admired it too. In the shifting tides of the warp, Abaddon became a lodestone, a fixed point of will amid endless change. He was a paradox, servant and master, mortal and myth. He wore no crown forged by divine hand. His crown was the loyalty of the Black Legion. His throne was the vengeful spirit, wrapped in storms and blood. His scepter was the talon of Horus, crackling with the memories of a brighter age twisted to a darker purpose. He needed nothing more. In the endless halls of the Eye of Terror, demons whispered his name in fear and awe. In the hidden temples of chaos-worshipping cults across the Imperium, his visage was etched in blood and fire. And among the Imperium's shattered defenders, a new dread took root. Abaddon was not merely another traitor lord, another warlord seeking petty vengeance. He was something far worse. He was inevitable. He would not be stopped by a single battle. He would not be slain by a single hero. He would not be undone by betrayal or chance, because he had no master but war itself. Because he had no allegiance but to the final, inevitable death of the Emperor's lie. As the long war ground onward, as Black Crusade after Black Crusade lashed the Imperium like the strikes of a hammer against a cracking anvil, Abaddon endured. He did not ascend. He did not fall. He remained. Between gods and men, a black star rising, a harbinger of the galaxy's final twilight. The gods watched him still, covetous, frustrated, admiring. They would have him one day, or he would have them. But until that day, Ezekiel Abaddon, War Master of Chaos, strode the galaxy as its darkest king, mortal, undefeated, and utterly unbroken. The slow thunder of the long war rumbled onward, shaking the foundations of the Imperium with every passing century. But Abaddon was not content with slow decay alone. He wanted something greater, a strike not just at flesh and bone, but at the arteries through which the Imperium's very life flowed. He wanted to tear open the stars themselves, and so he turned his gaze upon the Gothic sector. The Gothic sector, a crown jewel of Imperial might, a nexus of trade routes, fortress worlds, and naval bastions, a region whose void stations and fortified moons fed the wider Imperium like veins pumping blood to a bloated heart. If the Gothic sector fell, it would not simply cost the Imperium territory, it would cripple it, it would starve it, it would bleed it out from within. Abaddon prepared not merely an invasion, but a cataclysm. The Gothic War would become one of the greatest campaigns of the Black Legion's early history, and a blueprint for every terror that would follow. The initial moves were subtle, scattered raiding parties, small cult uprisings on isolated mining worlds, strange disappearances of merchant vessels in the outer void. The Gothic lords, secure in their pride, barely stirred. But Abaddon was not waging a simple raid. He was laying a trap. When the first Black Legion fleets entered the Gothic sector, they did so under cover of darkness. Warp storms that had no natural cause, psychic maelstroms that blinded Imperial astropaths, electronic interference that silenced entire systems. By the time the Imperial Navy realized what was happening, half their communications had been severed. When Abaddon's true vanguard emerged, it was with the fury of a black sun rising. The vengeful spirit led the charge, accompanied by a new horror. The Blackstone fortresses. Vast constructs, ancient beyond reckoning, torn from the depths of forgotten tombs. Each Blackstone fortress was a weapon capable of annihilating entire worlds, and Abaddon had not one, but several. The Gothic sector burned. Imperial strongholds that had stood inviolate for 10,000 years were reduced to ash in moments. World after world vanished in bursts of psychic annihilation as the Blackstone fortresses unleashed their terrible energies. Planets cracked like eggshells under firepower that should not have existed. Naval battles erupted across the void, desperate, savage clashes that turned entire star systems into graveyards of shattered hulls. The Imperial Navy fought with courage beyond measure. Battle groups rallied. Admirals sacrificed themselves to buy precious hours. Planetary governors conscripted every able-bodied soul to man the defenses. It was not enough. The Black Legion moved like a tide, overwhelming isolated pockets of resistance, bypassing strongholds that could not be cracked immediately, focusing instead on severing the sector's infrastructure. Shipyards were razed. Fuel depots were detonated, astropathic choirs were silenced, their screams echoing through the warp. One by one, the Gothic sector's arteries were cut, and through the breach poured not just the Black Legion, but their allies. Word-bearers spreading madness through cult uprisings, Night Lords sowing terror among defenseless worlds, Iron Warriors building siege works over the ruins of fallen cities. The Gothic War was not a blitzkrieg, it was a slow, methodical death. The sector's worlds were not taken in glorious battles, but strangled into submission, their skies blackened by endless waves of dropships, their lands crawling with the twisted banners of chaos. Abaddon himself moved with terrifying precision. Unlike the early days of the Long War, there was no waste, no squandering of resources. He fought like a man who had learned every lesson the heresy had to offer. He struck not where the enemy was strongest, but where they were most vulnerable. He shattered morale before he shattered defenses. He eroded alliances before he broke armies. And when planets fell, he made examples of them. Some worlds he exterminated entirely, reducing their surfaces to radioactive glass. Others he left broken but alive, a warning to their neighbors of what would come if they resisted. In the halls of the High Lords of Terra, panic whispered. Reinforcements were dispatched in a mad rush. Adeptus Astartes chapters, Astra Militarum regiments, entire fleets. But warp storms, those loyal hounds of the eye, delayed them, scattered them, shredded their formations before they could unite. For years, the Gothic sector was left to its own desperate struggle. It was not total conquest. Abaddon did not need it to be. He knew better than to overextend. He struck, crippled, and withdrew, leaving devastation in his wake. By the time Imperial reinforcements finally clawed their way through the warp and reasserted control, the damage was done. The Gothic sector would survive, barely, but it would never fully recover. Whole subsectors were depopulated, lost to chaos, corruption, or simple annihilation. Trade routes would take centuries to re-establish. Naval strength was depleted beyond easy repair. And most critically, the Blackstone fortresses, his ultimate weapons, had been tested and proven. Even though a few had been recaptured by desperate Imperial counterattacks, Abaddon had learned what he needed to know. The Imperium could bleed. It could stagger. It could be made to suffer 1,000 cuts until it no longer had the strength to stand. The Gothic War had proven it, not in a single overwhelming victory, but in attrition, in corrosion, in rot. It was a pattern Abaddon would repeat again and again, never giving the Imperium a clear target to strike, never offering a single decisive battle where he could be cornered and slain. Instead, he would stretch the Imperium thin, stretch it until it snapped. In the aftermath of the Gothic War, the Black Legion did not retreat to lick its wounds. It regrouped, it evolved, it prepared. And the Imperium, battered and gasping, could only pray that the horrors of the Gothic War were not the beginning of something worse. They were. Abaddon watched from the eye's ragged edges, the vengeful spirit slipping into the warp like a shark into dark waters. The long war ground on. The Gothic War was not its climax, it was its overture, and the true symphony of ruin had only just begun. Cadia had always been the sentinel, a world forged in perpetual vigilance, its people born into war, its very stones humming with defiance. For 10,000 years, Cadia had stood, bloody but unbroken, a gatekeeper against the horrors of the Eye of Terror. It was not only a fortress world, it was a symbol, a promise to all the Imperium that the tide of chaos, no matter how monstrous, could be held at bay. Abaddon had bled Cadia before, during the First Black Crusade, and after, each assault a hammer blow against the world's defenses. But now he would bring the final strike, no longer to weaken, no longer to harass, but to annihilate. The 13th Black Crusade was no mere campaign of terror. It was a cataclysm, a force of destruction so vast that the stars themselves seemed to recoil. Abaddon hurled the full fury of the Black Legion against Cadia, and more. From the Eye of Terror surged endless legions, the corrupted remnants of the traitor legions, demon-forged monstrosities, abominable constructs of the Dark Mechanicum, and tide after tide of cultist armies swollen by centuries of hidden growth. Warp rifts tore open like infected wounds, disgorging demonic hosts onto battlefields already littered with the dead. The vengeful spirit returned to the Cadian system, its ancient guns roaring to life. Behind it followed a black armada without number, a fleet forged in the fires of 10,000 years of war. At the heart of the invasion, gleaming with terrible majesty, moved Abaddon's greatest weapon, the stolen Blackstone Fortress. It loomed in the void like a harbinger of the end, its impossible technologies gathered from the ruins of a long-dead empire, now twisted to serve chaos. The Cadians stood ready. They had always been ready. From the Kasser cities where children learned to strip and clean lace guns before they learned to read, to the towering bastions ringed in void-shielded walls, the planet bristled with defiance. The defenders were not alone. Space Marine chapters, Astra Militarum regiments, and even elements of the Adeptus Mechanicus had mustered to Cadia's defense, recognizing the importance of the final gate. Saint Celestine herself descended among the defenders, a living miracle wrapped in golden wings, bearing the Emperor's light against the onrushing dark. But Abaddon had come for more than a siege. He had come for annihilation. The opening strikes were apocalyptic. The Blackstone Fortress unleashed its fury, lances of coruscating energy that vaporized entire void stations in seconds. The orbital defense platforms that had withstood centuries of assault were reduced to drifting slag. Naval battles erupted in Cadia's orbit, the skies above the world choked with fire and wreckage. The defenders fought with unmatched ferocity, shattering ship after ship, but Abaddon's fleet was endless, a black tide that could not be turned aside. Then came the ground war. The first wave of drop pods rained down like meteors, the impact quakes felt from pole to pole. From the smoking craters rose the Black Legion, warriors clad in midnight armor, ancient heralds of humanity's fall, guns roaring and blades thirsting for imperial blood. Behind them came the demons, shrieking hosts of Siege, roiling plague tides of Nurgle, howling berserkers of Khorne, all pouring through the ruptured skies. Cadia's Kassers, the mighty fortress cities, became charnel houses. Streets turned into kill zones. Hab blocks crumbled under artillery barrages. Trenches filled and refilled with the bodies of the fallen. Every meter of ground was bought with blood. Every victory cost more than the defenders could afford. Still, Cadia fought. Still, the gate held. But the doom Abaddon had unleashed was not just one of flesh and steel. It was a doom of the very fabric of reality. The pylons, the ancient monoliths scattered across Cadia, had always been more than decoration, more than relics. They were the linchpins of the Cadian gate, psychic anchors that kept the Eye of Terror from expanding. Abaddon had long known this. He had not come merely to conquer Cadia. He had come to break it. As the battle raged, sorcerers of the Black Legion and their demonic allies performed foul rituals upon the pylons, sabotaging their ancient mechanisms. Each corrupted pylon weakened the barrier between the materium and the immaterium, allowing the warp to seep further into reality. The very skies over Cadia began to bleed. Storms of unreality swept across the surface. Gravity twisted and screamed. Time itself stuttered and faltered. The defenders fought on in a world coming apart at the seams. it was Saint Celestine who rallied the Imperial forces for the final stand, leading counterattacks that hurled back the tides of heretic and demon alike. In the darkest moments, her golden light blazed brightest, and for a time it seemed even Abaddon's fury might be held back. But the Despoiler was not yet finished. He unleashed his final blow. The Blackstone fortress, turned into a weapon of apocalyptic force, was aimed directly at Cadia's surface. Its engines flared, its power cells, strained to their absolute limit, groaned with the force of the energy being channeled. The weapon fired. The shot shattered Cadia's crust. The world itself screamed as fissures, kilometers wide, tore open, vomiting molten rock into the skies. The pylons, ancient and weary, cracked and crumbled. The barrier collapsed. The Eye of Terror expanded with a roar that shook the heavens, bleeding into real space in a tide of madness and death. Cadia was broken. Not conquered, not occupied. Broken. The ground quaked and split. Cities fell into bottomless chasms. Oceans boiled away. Even then, the survivors fought. Even as the world crumbled beneath them, they rallied again and again, buying time for evacuation ships to escape into the void. Abaddon watched it all from the bridge of the vengeful spirit. He did not gloat. There was no need. He had done what Horus never could. He had broken the unbreakable. He had proven that even the strongest bastions of the Emperor's realm could be reduced to dust with enough will and enough hate. Cadia had stood for 10 millennia. Now it was a grave. The gateway to Terra lay exposed. The great rift, the cicatrix maledictum, tore through the galaxy like a screaming wound, severing the Imperium in two. The galaxy would never be the same. And in the cold, dark silence that followed the destruction of Cadia, the Black Legion began to move again, deeper into Imperial space, through the shattered gates, into the heart of humanity's dying empire. The Long War had entered a new age, an age of endings, and Abaddon the Despoiler, War Master of Chaos, would be its architect. Cadia's bones still smoldered when Abaddon set the next phase of his war into motion. The Imperium, broken across the spine of the galaxy by the Great Rift, reeled like a wounded titan. Worlds vanished into darkness. Astropathic choirs were silenced. The Emperor's light flickered across half the stars. But Abaddon knew better than to let his enemies recover. He needed a new weapon. One not merely of fire and steel, but of dread, a weapon that would turn the already broken Imperium into a carcass ready for final consumption. The Eye of Terror pulsed with malign light as the War Master of Chaos brokered a new alliance, not with a mortal warlord or a demonic prince, but with something older, colder, and vastly more ambitious. Vashtor the Archiphane, a being of the warp, but unlike the diamond gods that clawed and screeched for mortal devotion. Vashtor was a creature of mechanism and madness, an architect of nightmares, a forge master of impossible designs. His creations were living paradoxes, machines that defied logic, devices fueled by the raw anguish of trapped souls. He sought no cults, no prayers, no worship. He sought only creation, perfect, terrible creation. And Abaddon, ever the strategist, saw in Vashtor the means to elevate the Long War to a final apocalyptic crescendo. Their bargain was simple. Vashtor would forge weapons beyond mortal comprehension. Abaddon would unleash them upon the galaxy. Together they would unmake the Imperium from within, not merely through war, but through entropy, madness, and collapse. The centerpiece of their plan became known to the galaxy in screams and horror, the Arks of Omen. They were unlike any ships that had sailed the stars before. Vast star fortresses reforged in the crucibles of hellish forges, blessed by the dark mechanicum, Cursed by the unquiet spirits of 1,000 forgotten worlds, each ark was a city of war, bristling with weapons drawn from the oldest, darkest repositories of forbidden technology. Each ark carried demon engines that prowled its decks, waiting to be unleashed upon unwary defenders. Each ark bore vaults sealed with runes of ancient power, holding terrible cargoes whose very existence threatened the thin skein of reality. And above all, each ark was a key, part of a puzzle whose solution would bring about the death of the Emperor's realm. The Arks of Omen were not created merely for conquest. They were designed to seek and retrieve ancient artifacts scattered across the galaxy. Relics connected to something far greater, something Vashtor whispered of only in the darkest tongues. The key to eternity. A device, or perhaps a network, or perhaps a god weapon. No mortal mind could fully comprehend it, capable of severing the last, desperate cords binding the Emperor to his failing throne, capable of ending mankind's last hope. The Arks were sent forth across the fractured galaxy, guided by Abaddon's hand. Each Ark, commanded by a favored lieutenant, became a harbinger of doom. Harken Worldclaimer, self-proclaimed Herald of Abaddon, took one Ark and spearheaded a campaign of terror across Vigilus and its neighboring systems, sowing chaos wherever he set foot. Other Arks, their names lost or forbidden to speak, drifted into Imperial territory like dark omens, their arrival signaled by plagues of madness, warp storms, and the collapse of entire sectors. Each Ark sought fragments of the key, hidden vaults, lost shrines, shattered webway portals, all scattered across the void by civilizations that had long since fallen into dust. Imperial defenders, already battered by the aftermath of Cadia's fall, struggled to respond. Some Arks descended upon fortress worlds, smashing defenses with their unholy might. Others slipped unseen into the void, their tendrils of corruption seeping into hive cities and manufactorums, rotting them from the inside. Everywhere they went, the same pattern emerged. Worlds fell silent, populations vanished, battlefields were left not merely in ruin, but somehow less, as if reality itself had been gnawed away, leaving behind hollow echoes. The Imperium scrambled to comprehend the nature of the threat. Reports were fragmented and maddened, tales of black ships that bled fire, of armies that moved without sound, of weapons that erased whole regiments from existence with a whisper. The Inquisition declared an Omega-level threat. The Adeptus Mechanicus initiated their most forbidden protocols, sacrificing entire Forge worlds in attempts to stall the spread. Even the Adeptus Astartes, pride of the Emperor's wrath, found themselves outmatched. Their fortress monasteries bombarded from orbit, their chapters scattered and broken by foes that cared nothing for honor or challenge. And through it all, Abaddon watched. He did not race from battlefield to battlefield. He did not waste himself on petty glories. He let the Arks do their work, unraveling the Imperium's strength thread by thread. He moved with cold, merciless calculation, always staying one step ahead of Imperial attempts to retaliate. He understood something few others did, that war was not won by the sword alone. It was won by eroding your enemy's will, by making them believe defeat was inevitable. The Arks of Omen carried more than guns. They carried despair, they carried inevitability, and they carried the whispers of Vashtor's great design, the slow gathering of the key, piece by piece, hour by hour, across a galaxy too broken to stop it. The Ark's assaults were not without cost. Some were destroyed, burned down by desperate last stands. Some failed in their missions, their cargo lost or corrupted. But it did not matter. Enough succeeded. Enough fragments were gathered. The slow, grinding progress toward the unlocking of the key continued. And as it did, the galaxy grew darker. The Astronomicon flickered more often. Warp storms swallowed once safe trade routes. Entire sectors fell silent, their fates unknown and unspoken. The Imperium, mighty yet fragile, began to buckle under pressures it could no longer comprehend, much less resist. And standing at the heart of this unseen storm, hidden amid the eye's howling madness, Abaddon smiled. The Long War had entered a new phase, no longer a simple contest of fleets and armies. Now, it was a battle for the soul of reality itself, and Abaddon held the blade that would carve that soul apart. The galaxy was no longer whole. The Great Rift, the Cicatrix Maledictum, burned across the heavens, a vast gaping wound spilling the roiling madness of the warp into real space. Entire sectors were cut adrift, left blind and leaderless, swallowed by the hungering dark. Night reigned across half the Imperium, and in that endless, suffocating night, one name rose above all others: Abaddon the Despoiler, War Master of Chaos, Lord of the Black Legion, Master of the Long War. His vengeance was no longer a future threat. It was a living reality, no longer a pretender in the eyes of gods and mortals, no longer a shadow of Horus. Abaddon was his own storm now, a black sun burning across a broken galaxy. The Imperium Nihilus, the Dark Imperium, lay beneath his shadow, a sundered half-realm where the Emperor's light could no longer reach. This was no mere victory of arms. It was a triumph of inevitability. The Imperium could not defeat what it could no longer see, could no longer organize to resist. Across the Nihilus half, Imperial command structures collapsed. Warp travel, once dangerous but possible, became suicide. Astropathic messages were swallowed whole by shrieking demons. Planets turned feral. Systems declared their independence. Civil wars erupted as isolated worlds clawed at each other for survival. And above it all, the Black Legion sailed the new currents of madness, like wolves among a slaughtered herd. The arcs of Omen, now seasoned weapons of terror, struck from the shadows. Hosts of the Black Legion descended upon worlds already choked with despair, carving bloody paths through defenders too blind to even know where to send their forces. Abaddon did not need to conquer every world. He needed only to remind them who ruled this new galaxy. And so he did, with fire, with blood, with silence. Whole sectors simply vanished from Imperial records, their names erased from the annals of the Adeptus Administratum. Star systems once proud with Imperial banners became haunted wastelands, the only surviving witnesses insane or corrupted beyond recognition. The Black Legion was no longer simply an army. It was a phenomenon, a force of nature, an avalanche of destruction gathering momentum with every passing decade. Abaddon himself remained a living icon of terror. Clad in blackened Terminator plate, the talon of Horus crackling at his side, the demon blade Drachnian whispering in his mind, he strode through battlefields like the Reaper incarnate. He slaughtered Imperial champions with contemptuous ease. He shattered fortress cities whose walls had never fallen. He faced Primaris Space Marines, the Emperor's newest hope, and found them wanting. He did not seek glory. He did not boast. He simply destroyed. The Black Legion, too, had evolved beyond recognition. No longer the shattered remnants of the Sons of Horus, they were a brotherhood of the damned drawn from across the ruined traitor legions and beyond. Veterans of 10,000 battles, monsters in black armor, each bearing the mark of loyalty, not to a Primarch, but to the Long War itself. No god claimed the Black Legion fully. No empire contained it. It was a hunger that could not be sated, a wound that could not be closed, and it would bleed the galaxy forever if left unchecked. Even the High Lords of Terra, cloistered in the last true bastion of the Imperium, spoke of Abaddon's name with dread now. No longer a rebellious son, no longer a failed usurper, a war master in truth, Robout Guilliman, the returned Primarch and Lord Commander of the Imperium, recognized the threat Abaddon posed like no other. He knew that if the Despoiler's momentum was not broken, there would come a day when even Terra itself could be reached, and the light of the Emperor snuffed out forever. But knowledge and action were distant things in a galaxy shattered by war, and Abaddon moved faster than hope could heal. Every strike, every campaign, every dark alliance forged by the War Master was calculated to widen the wounds of the Imperium. He seeded entire sectors with cult uprisings long before his fleets arrived, ensuring that when the hammer finally fell, the defenders were too weak, too divided to resist. He bargained with Dark Xeno's powers, not as an equal, not as a supplicant, but as a master who knew exactly how far to trust a blade before turning it on its wielder. He unleashed demonic hosts with precision, not wastefully as Horus once had, but surgically, breaking the will of populations before his armies ever fired a shot. And always he looked beyond the immediate victory. Always he laid foundations for wars yet to come, because Abaddon understood now what Horus had not. Victory was not a moment, it was a process, a slow, grinding devouring of everything that had once given mankind its strength. Faith, unity, hope. The War Master of Nihilus was not just the Lord of battlefields, he was the Lord of collapse. The galaxy, once vibrant even in its brutality, had become a mausoleum under his gaze, a realm of flickering lights, dead stars, hollow victories, and endless grinding war. Even the so-called triumphs of the Imperium, the fleeting counterattacks, the reclamations of lost worlds, were hollow things, purchased with blood that could not be spared. They were delaying actions, not salvation. The long war could not be stopped, not anymore. Abaddon had seen to that. He was patient. He would not fall to a single defeat. He would not gamble all on a single battle. He would bleed the Imperium century after century, millennium after millennium, until there was nothing left but ruin. And then, when the last shrines fell, when the last champions were silenced, when the last false prayers to a corpse god faded into cold silence, then he would stand alone among the ashes. Victorious, not because of a single moment of triumph, but because he had never stopped, because he had never yielded, because he had outlasted them all. The galaxy was dying. It did not know it yet. But Abaddon did. He had made it so. And the black banners of the Black Legion would one day fly over a universe remade not in hope, not in order, but in eternal glorious war.